They had a good practice this morning, so it's a good time to ask one of the most often asked questions when I don't know, people at a hangout or at the store or wherever find out that I talk about the Panthers on the show. They usually ask, how long until they're good, right? How long's the rebuild going to take? Actually, usually they ask about Bryce Young, but then they eventually get to, like, what are we looking at here? 2, 3, 3 year, 4 years, 6 years? How long is it going to take?
Is he the guy?
Yeah, there's a lot of that for Bryce. But then when it comes to the team, how long? How long? Well, I'll tell you this. I know it's possible within 3 years. Going from where they are now to where they want to be, I know it's possible within 3 years. And the reason I can say that.
Are you counting this as year one?
Yes.
Okay.
This is year one. So, like, how long from now? When would you say the rebuild started? Because you're in the same place you were in at best. You may have taken a few steps back. From where they are now to where they want to be, I know it's possible within 3 years. Not easy, but it's possible. Do you know why? Because I just saw the Detroit Lions do it. I just saw the Detroit Lions do it. Now, right now, we are getting ready. I don't know if everybody knows this. Less than a week away is Cutdown Day in the NFL. You have to have your rosters down all the way to essentially 53 names.
4 o'clock on Tuesday next week.
That is kind of when you know the health of your team. And what I mean by that is even the bad teams have a few good players, right? Like the Calvin Johnsons of the world existed. The Barry Sanders of the world, I don't know why I'm just picking Lions, but they're going to be the example. They exist where they were all-time greats, Hall of Famers, but never really got to test themselves on a great team. They exist. So you can have a bad team and have a handful of very, very good players. But the thing holding you back is the rest, right? So a lot of times on Cutdown Day, when you look at the names you're debating on who you're going to cut, that can tell you how good your team is, right? If you're picking, like, I guess we keep this guy because he's not great, but he plays linebacker and we need a linebacker, so we'll keep him.
Have 53.
Yeah, he's a lotto ticket. Maybe there's a 1% chance he turns into a starter. We'll keep him. That shows that your roster's not that strong. Meanwhile, if the opposite is true, if you're like, are we really going to cut this guy? He's an NFL caliber player. Like he could be a starter in 2 years. We're really going to cut him? And your GM looks at you like, okay, who else do you want to cut? Pick someone else. And everyone else is more established, proven, maybe cheaper, maybe younger. And it's like, no, like, yeah, we're going to cut him because the rest of our roster is that good. I think right now the Panthers are actually, let me say the humane thing first. Cutdown Day always stinks for GMs and assistant GMs and player personnel because you hate to just, tell people like, hey, your dream is over. See coach with your playbook. It's donezo. But I don't think they will lay in bed that night going, someone in our division is going to claim that guy on waivers and we're going to hate that he's not on our roster. The guys they're going to cut, they're going to go, you know what? Guy wasn't ready. Guy wasn't an NFL player. Wasn't good enough. Liked him. Wasn't good enough. That's where the Lions were 3 years ago. And Dan Campbell pretty much said as much when asked about roster construction, talking to the media yesterday. Here's Dan Campbell.
It's changed significantly. It's, 21, we were, we were wide open. Literally wide open. You had an idea that Sewell was going to make it, and we drafted him 7 overall. And you have an idea on some of these guys, but there was a whole roster full of, we have no idea. We don't know who's going to be the next receiver. We don't know, linebacker position, the D line. It was wide open, and and so now here we are, and you feel like you've tied down most of these spots, and we're going to have to let go of some good players. You know, I think ultimately that I think can play in this league at some point here at different positions, and that's a hard thing to do. But it also shows where our roster is at to this point. It's grown a ton. Brad's done a hell of a job.
That Brady reference at the end is Brad Holmes, their GM. 3 years. They completely not saying they cycled every player through, but 3 years they completely cycled their roster, keeping the good, moving on from the bad, keeping the good, moving on from the bad, keeping the good, moving on from the bad, to the point now where they think they're going to be cutting good. It's the great literary phrase, kill your darlings. Should I explain what that means? Because I'm a literary kind of nerd. Kill your darlings means when you go back to read, like if you write a novel and you go back for a second writing and you're cutting great scenes, like maybe you cut out a character who you love, like fully fleshed out. You're like, that is such a great character. Why am I cutting him? Think about how good the book must be, because everything you keep is better than what you cut, right? You're not cutting the best part of the book. So the saying is kill your darlings. Write the book so well that the things you cut are great, because that just means everything that you keep is better than great. That's where the Lions have their roster. And by the way, they ain't lying. See what I did there? They aren't lying because they do have a really good roster. And they have drafted really well. And they did find superstars not in the first round like Amon-Ra St. Brown. And they did find a quarterback that they actually got almost as the throw-in on a trade. They sent Matt Stafford to the Rams for 2 first-round picks. And, oh, by the way, you have to take Jared Goff too.
Okay, fine.
Now he's playing great football.
Gosh, they're a couple plays away from making a Super Bowl last year.
Literally. Sam Laporta looked like a stud. Penei Sewell looks like a stud. Their defense, the linebacker Sanders, right? Stud.
Jack Campbell.
That's actually who I was thinking, not Sanders. Campbell is exactly who I was thinking. Like, they have a legitimately strong top-to-bottom roster. And let me remind you the team we're talking about. The Detroit Lions. They were bad for decades. With a sprinkling of Hall of Fame players during those decades, and they still couldn't get to this point. So if I'm the Panthers, if I'm Dan Morgan, if I'm Dave Canales, right, you're not going to, it's like the football thing. If you get down 17, coach starts telling you there's no 18-point play. The Panthers are trailing by 3 scores right now. There is no 22-point play. You can't fix it by tomorrow, but if you constantly make good roster decisions, if you constantly evaluate well, I know it's possible within 3 years. Maybe in 2027, Dave Canales can give a speech like Dan Campbell just gave. Hey, back in 2024, that Cutdown day, it was wide open. We didn't know what we were doing. We were just hope and a prayer trying to find a player down in the, 45 to 53 man on our roster. Now, gosh, everyone we cut gets picked up off waivers right away because everyone else in the league knows we're strong. That's where you want to be. 3 years. Maybe faster, but I wouldn't bank on it. You'd have to get pretty lucky. Maybe faster, but it would be pretty lucky. I'd take 4, if we're being honest. And by the way, every step along for the Lions, this is kind of what I'm saying. Every step along was like a little bit better than a little bit better. And that's what builds momentum, and that's why Dave Canales will keep his job, and that's why Dan Morgan will get more emboldened in his evaluation, and you get more and more and more until eventually you get where you want to go.
I think it's also was vital that Dan Campbell came in, established a culture that he wanted.
Yep.
I think that was big. We saw Brad Holmes. All right, let's find the guys that fit the culture that we want. And they knew it was a process. They knew it wasn't going to be an overnight thing. They were patient with it. And sure enough, look at what you got going for yourself.
Talk about trusting your culture and your evaluation, right? Drafted a running back 12 overall. Drafted a off-ball linebacker very, very early. These are bucking the trend in the NFL, but they knew what they were looking for. Lions are doing what you can do that.
Yeah.
Better be right. Better be right.